In the fall, Sandra and I began German and English school. German school was held 1 hour before and 1 hour after English classes, but due to Oma's assistance, I was already fluent in High German. It was from our new English teacher that I would get a real education. Mrs. Philippot was Catholic, or so we were told. She was from the nearby French community of St. Claude and had been hired by the colony to teach grades 1 to 5. Hutterite schools abided by the Department of Education's curriculum but were allowed to retain their distance from the outside world by having the school on colony property. At the beginning of the year, Mrs. Philippot would rely on the older girls as interpreters since her English language skills were poor, but there was nothing wrong with her eyesight. On the first day, she swept out of the colony in a white Buick and into the school wearing a fitted crimson dress with a double strand of pearls around her neck, smelling of cigarettes and English clothing stores. Her lipstick and nail polish matched the color of her dress exactly. Her high cheekbones were dusted with a soft sweep of rouge, and her dark brown hair was done in the same precise manner as Queen Elizabeth, whose picture hung immediately above her desk. Her feet were squeezed into jet black pointy high heels, and a matching purse glistened like polished ebony as she placed it on her desk with a thump. She was the most groomed and glamorous creature we had ever seen in our lives, and we nearly went cross-eyed looking her over. After the roll call, during which we had to spring to our feet and reply, "Present, Mrs. Philippot," she arranged for basins of water and large bars of soap to be brought to the back of the class, and we were lined up and ordered to wash our hands and then have them inspected, palms up, palms down. Although her mandate didn't extend to teaching us godliness, Mrs. Philippot felt obliged to impose her standards in cleanliness, not that some, like Roland, who loved skunks and mice and frogs better than anything, couldn't use a proper scrubbing. Roland hung out at the machine shop with his older brothers, and his hands were ingrained with grease and dirt, and that's the way he liked it. Mrs. Philippot tried valiantly to separate the boy from the grime, but then he would pass gas and she would flee for her economy-sized can of lilac air freshener. P.U., P.U., she lamented, streaming the poison up and down the aisles, while the rest of us coughed and rubbed our watering eyes until we nearly lost consciousness. When it was particularly foul, she would shout, "Roland, go to the washroom and don't come back." With a gleeful smile, Roland happily spent much of the school year in the bathroom looking out the windows at the squirrels. After the hand inspection, the girls had to line up and remove their muetzin for a hair assessment. Some of the girls had quickly stuffed their long hair into their bonnets, more concerned with getting to the Eschen school in time for the 7:30 breakfast than having a good hair day, and it came tumbling out in a disheveled mess. With Oma as my hairdresser, I never had to endure a scolding from Mrs. Philippot about my lack of neatness. When we were clean to Mrs. Philippot's satisfaction, the basins were put away, and we finally got down to the business of schooling, which began with singing O Canada and saying the Lord's Prayer. During O Canada, Mrs. Philippot stood at strict attention at the front of the class and led the singing, but as soon as we started saying the Lord's Prayer, she would grab a yardstick and march around the room, pounding it on the floor as she went. Our Father, thump, 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 which art in heaven, thump, thump, thump. If we dared to turn our heads and look at her, she'd bop us over the head with the yardstick, leaving us with the impression that Catholics did not approve of the Lord's Prayer. The school year took shape with reading, writing, and arithmetic assignments, none of which interested me as much as what our teacher was wearing. I learned my colors from her outfits, the days of the week from when she wore what, and my numbers from how often she changed high heels. Day after day, she wowed us with her perfectly tailored clothing and exquisitely matched necklaces, earrings, and bracelets. Every day when the bell announced the noon meal, classes were dismissed, and hungry students ran to the Eschenschule. Mrs. Philippot would barely escape to her special room in the back of her classroom, close the door, and apply a fresh coat of lipstick. The room was off limits to the rest of us and held a particular mystique because, along with school supplies, a couch, a small table, and 2 chairs, it was where Mrs. Philippot kept her extra pair of high heels. When she opened the door, the draught would smell of new books and perfume. Mrs. Philippot ate at the community kitchen with the rest of the women, but she never walked there by herself. She was escorted. It didn't seem right that someone so beautifully dressed should be alone, so a bevy of girls would wait for her outside the school and fight over who would attend her right side and who her left. No matter how cross or frustrated she had been with us in the morning, when she pushed open the door, we all jockeyed for position. The older girls usually went out, leaving the rest of us to follow, but even that was a thrill. watching the sleek, tapered heels of Mrs. Philippot's shoes disappear into Fairholme's sand, making small square holes all the way to the Eschenstuben. We wondered how such thin heels could support her entire body weight and whether her next meal would be the breaking point. We released Mrs. Philippot on the adult side of the communal kitchen to eat with the women and proceeded to the Eschenstuhl, where we would now be taking our 3 meals a day with the rest of the children between the ages of 6 and 15. A latched opening in the far wall gave us access to the main kitchen, through which the cook helpers passed bowls of à la Kartoffel, egg fries, and Fokken klops, pork burgers, that the teenage girls would set on the tables. We were again seated according to age, with the boys on one side and girls on the other. Andrew Gross, the assistant minister, supervised and kept order. Under his watchful eye, we closed our eyes and lifted our folded hands to say our prayers before and after each meal. At breakfast and supper meals, we would kneel for extended versions of our table prayers, addressing God in the most reverent tones. O du Allmächtigen, ewiger Gnädiger und Barmherziger Gott. During Mittag, the noon meal, we kept Rahel, our Eschenstuhl Ankala, on the run. If we ran out of something, we simply shouted for more. Brot, bread. Milk, milk. Hands were engaged more often than the cutlery, and reaching was more popular than passing. After the noon meal, we waited outside the adult dining room until Mrs. Philippot emerged and accompanied her back to school for afternoon classes. She was obsessed with dictation, and we had a test almost every day. Standing at the front of the class in her finery, she called out words for each grade. Grade 1s, cat. Grade 2s, never. Grade 3s, coral. Mrs. Philippot had a habit of running her fingers up and down her pearls, which made a soft purring sound that was intoxicating and did nothing to improve my spelling. We were lined up at the front of the class according to test results, and I was always dead last with Roland, the wildlife specialist. Roland was an accepted part of the decor in Fairholme, and Mrs. Philippot was no threat to his self-esteem. She was, after all, an ungodly English person who, in all likelihood, would end up in hell. And regardless of what she might think, he had his talents. Sandra and I were indebted to him for helping us to adjust to the new responsibilities that came with our age. Winter was pillow and quilt making time on the colony, and twice a week, all through the summer and early fall, our mothers harnessed us with a feather sack, and hoisted us over the Gonstol fence into the path of 1,000 honking geese to collect feathers. It took forever to fill our sacks, and the tiresome job cut into our playtime. At first we included leaves and twigs and goose droppings, but Oma warned me that even if my gentle mother let me get away with it, she would not. Sandra's mother took Oma's side. We were always on the lookout for dead geese, but Fairholme had the hardiest flock in the country, and none of them were going to croak on our account. Roland's frequent offers to kill one for us were becoming harder to resist, and once in a weak moment, Sandra and I gave in to temptation, and we said yes. We covered our eyes and turned away to purge ourselves of sin by association. Behind us came an awful thrashing and flapping and grunting and quacking as Roland attacked a large gander. It was hard to tell which utterances came from the boy and which from the goose. "Sei istat," he shouted as he sped off, bloodied and triumphant. The soft down feathers on the belly were just what our mothers wanted, and we stuffed our feddersock until they bulged. The fear of being caught and getting the strap in front of all the children in the Eschenstuhl was too much for us to ever consider a second offense, although nothing excited us more than finding a goose that had died of natural or near-natural causes. As children, we found contentment in the bosom of colony life and in the routines that directed every new season. The honey-colored paths that led us to school and play and occasionally into mischief remained a sea of softness, and Jake Vedder rewarded us for keeping them that way. He instructed us to gather all harmful debris, in particular broken glass, wherever we could find it, and when we had a little tin can's worth, to bring it to his house in exchange for candy and bubblegum. We scoured the paths and lawns and ditches like human vacuum cleaners, for Jake Vedder always had some new American candy on hand from his frequent visits to Hutterite colonies in the United States. Once, Sandra and I decided to make a determined effort to learn how to blow bubbles, but we didn't have any gum, so we spent an entire afternoon combing Fairholme's trails, for all we had to show for it by the end of the day was 2 rusty nails, not enough to earn a reward. Dusty and disappointed, we lay down on the patch of grass under the shade of a tree and watched the clouds go by. When Roland spotted us with our tin cans, he caught on right away. Would you like to know where Jake Vetter puts the pieces of glass we bring to him? He asks, his eyes twinkling. Joe, Sandra and I said in unison. Down in the dark corner in the kitchen basement, Roland pointed us to a large basin crammed with pieces of glass. We quickly filled our tins and ran to reap our reward. We had everything you could wish for here in Fairholme. Beautiful friendships, a strong sense of belonging, and enough excitement to keep us looking forward to each new day. In our hour of need, there was always Roland.